What is going on, everybody? Damn Good Average Bowler back for another episode of Calling All Bowlers. We are here today with two of my good friends. I'm going to call y'all the Bearded Brothers here because you guys are both from Oregon. Mr. Paul Dorchak, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great.
And as always, Mr. Dustin Capps, how are you doing, my good man?
Fan bloody tastic. Happy to be here.
So, I came up with this idea for episode 4. Was originally just gonna, Paul and me were gonna do the whole thing we did, like the first 2 episodes, and Dustin helped us so well last week with socks, and then he told me a really good interesting fact that he was in fact from Oregon, and I was like, hey, Paul's in Oregon too, so this will probably be a good dynamic for the show. So Dustin, I'm gonna let you start it off here, and you and Paul can talk back and forth. But I think before we do that, Paul, why don't you tell everybody that's watching out here, tell us a little about yourself, like where are you from and how long have you lived there, where you're at?
Well, I'm obviously Paul Dorchak, from Eugene, Oregon. Bowl out of primarily out of Furs Bowl here in Eugene. I've been bowling off and on for most of my life. Going bowling with the family when I was younger. Got really into bowling when I was at college at Oregon State. Uh, Started bowling out of Highland Bowl there in Corvallis. Um, Had a girlfriend that bought me a cheap little $20 Kmart special bowling ball, plastic Brunswick ball. That's how I ended up actually starting bowling. Been living in Oregon most of my life. Spent 3 years in Denver and then a decade down in California, but been back here in Oregon for going on almost 4 years now.
4 years, okay.
How
Dustin,
old are you, Paul? How old are you right now, Paul?
Oh, I'm 48.
Okay. What took you to Denver?
Had friends that lived in Colorado Springs, and it was just we were at a place in our life. Hey, we had just had a son. He was maybe 8 months old, 8, 9 months old when we moved there. It was just wanted to change the scenery, so we went to Denver of all places.
How many kids do you have? Do you just have the one, or how many kids do you have?
I've got two. I've got a 23-year-old and an 18-year-old.
so you just graduated high school, or
Uh, no, he ended up dropping out of school. He was just kind of done with school and wanted to get to working. So, but yeah, he would have graduated this year had he graduated.
okay? Well, hey man, it's not for everybody, and if you want to go right into the workforce, guns a blazing, I like it.
Yep.
Did you ever? So let's go back real quick. You said you kind of did some college bowling. Did you mention some bowling there in Corvallis?
Well, I didn't bowl. I bowled while I was in college. I didn't bowl for like Oregon State didn't have a college team or anything. But just that's when I got started. Going down like any other teenager wanted to just do something fun, and we'd go bowling. And after bowling at Highland quite a few times, one of the guys that worked there was like, "Hey, you want to bowl in a league with us?" I was like, I have never done it before. I was like, sure, why not? So that's how I got into league bowling. My first two leagues were actually ABC leagues back when the ABC was still a thing. And
Okay.
that's how I got into bowling leagues was up there. And it was just the first league was just a fun league, and then the second league I bowled in was a summer ball league. So I actually got my first ball up there, which is just a Brunswick zone, little sparkly green Brunswick zone.
Oh, okay. So, plastic ball. What color was it?
What color was it?
Yeah, what color was it?
Uh it was like a tealish blue.
But the reason I'm asking is because in my experience and from my latest TikTok, the darker colored bowling balls, I've been told they hook a whole lot.
Oh, absolutely. The dark, especially if you can get a good black one, those things hook like crazy.
Uh huh. Oh man. Paul, let me ask you something here. Besides bowling, what kind of other hobbies and interests do you have?
Sports, love sports. I'm a huge Oakland A's fan. Um, I've been into have been a baseball fan since as long as I can remember. Probably back to when I was like 5 years old was when I first found the love of baseball. And if anybody asks what sports, my sports, America's pastime, baseball.
Baseball.
Man, I remember like in the '90s, the Oakland A's used to be one of my favorite teams too. The Bash Brothers, man.
Yeah.
Dennis Eckersley back in that time, Ricky Henderson, man.
Canseco, McGuire. Did you ever get to see them live, Paul?
I did. We would go. So we lived down there for about 10 years, and I probably averaged at least 5 to 10 games a year
Nice.
at a bare minimum.
Dude, that's awesome right there. Yeah. You know, I got to see them when Huntsville had a AA affiliate of the A's. It was the Huntsville Stars, and they did an exhibition with the A's, and they actually did a home run derby. And of course, McGuire and Canseco were the hot commodities, so the tickets were sold out, you know, in the snap of a finger. And McGuire was launching bombs. There was people reporting finding baseballs like right in the middle of the parkway here. We're like, it was like the stadium's here, and then they hit them out, and we got the parkway going north and south, and there's people finding them out on the parkway. It was a pretty cool deal.
Real quick, I jotted this down. One of you guys, Michael, if you want to take this one, I know Paul had said it earlier, back when it was still ABC. You want to just touch on that for the viewers that made, because it took me a second. I was like, what is that? It's like, oh yeah. But do you want to just touch on real quick for us what the ABC was?
And granted, this is a long time ago, and it's been forever. It was basically just it was another what do you call it? Whatever you would call the USBC. It was just another one. There was at the time, and I think the USBC was around too, and it was just two separate entities that eventually ended up combining, from what I understand, combining to become the USBC as we know today.
Yeah, it was the ABC and the WIBC.
Yeah.
What was the W one? I never heard of that one, I don't think.
Women's International Bowling Congress. And then it was the American Bowling Congress.
Yeah. It took me a minute. I know as soon as they said ABC, I was like, wait, well, oh, yeah. But, yeah, so you get back to Eugene, but you spent most of your time, we had a little bit of a talk about this beforehand, so for the viewers, you came up primarily as a Beavers fan.
Well, growing up, I wasn't.
No?
Growing up, I was definitely a Duck fan because I grew up in Cresswell, so I lived in the Eugene area. My dad would take me to Duck athletic events all the time, so I grew up as a Duck. But then when it came to college, Oregon didn't have anything that I wanted. My actual first choice for college originally was Penn State. That was my dream, was to go to Penn State. I ended up applied to 4 colleges: Penn State, Texas A&M, Washington State, and Oregon State. I was accepted to all 4, but sadly it was just too expensive to try to go out of state. So I settled on Oregon State, and I've been a Beaver fan since the fall of 1994.
I tell you what, though, that the Beavers campus, man, in Corvallis, I went probably 98 or late 90s. I went with my cousin because he was going to be going there, the one that played flute in the band there. It was a gorgeous campus, man.
Yeah. It's like when you see like on the college game day shows on Saturday mornings, and you know they have the cameras that they show the campuses. You know, I growing up going to Oregon games, and I at the time thought, okay, this is what college football is all about. But it's like that's not what I really see on TV. And then I went to Oregon State, and it's like, oh, now this is what I used to see on TV. Oregon, it's like going to an NFL event because Autzen Stadium's, well, not now it's considered part of campus, but then it was off campus. And it was like you had the stadium with the giant parking lots. It was literally like going to an NFL game. Whereas then when I went to an Oregon State game, it's like, oh, now this is college football. This is what I see on TV.
We got to play on Autzen Stadium actually in high school. I played football and baseball are my biggest sports. I remember the first time we got to play on Autzen Stadium. Again, this is late 90s. This is probably 98, 99. And it was still that just terrible AstroTurf. And it felt like damn near concrete underneath it. Like I still got a couple scars on my elbows from the AstroTurf. But I remember the first time finding out, like I dressed varsity as a sophomore and I knew I wasn't really playing much, you know, but we just went there and walking through the tunnel. And the first time walking onto that field at Autzen Stadium was just like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. But it's also funny though, because we are high schoolers and nobody except your parents really care about, you know, high school football. But you know what I mean? But we're in Autzen Stadium, dude, for a high school game. And it looked like it was basically empty. Like all of our fans took up like that much of all of this.
Yeah.
So nobody was there, but man, it was cool. Do you remember the BMX? Do you know the BMX track behind Autzen Stadium?
It's still there.
Really? I've raced on that a couple times, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, I remember when I was younger, like 7 or 8, we'd hop on our bikes. I lived in Springfield then, and we'd ride down there and go screw around on there during the daytime when, you know, they weren't doing any events on it.
Yeah, it was great. So did you go to any schools in Springfield?
I only went to elementary school in Springfield. I went to Moffett, which actually doesn't exist anymore. Don't tell me you went to Moffett too.
We moved to, so Mike says I'm from Oregon. I kind of am, right? When I was born in Texas, we moved to Oregon in 1990. 5th grade was my first year in Oregon. The only elementary school I went to in Oregon that one year was Moffett. Moffett, and then I went to Springfield Middle.
Yeah.
What's that saying? 6 degree separation.
Mm-hmm. Moffett's not there anymore, huh?
No, it's they demolished it and they rebuilt Hamlin. Hamlin Middle School got a huge rebuild. They actually have they got their baseball stadium rebuilt there too. And they've got a semi-pro team there now, similar to like the Eugene Challengers, or back in the day they were the Pepsi Challengers, but how they played at North Eugene. Now they got a team that the Springfield Drifters that play at Hamlin, and they've actually got a really nice stadium in there.
Well, I remember going to the Eugene Emeralds games.
Yeah.
Are the M's still there?
The M's are still there. Sadly, Civic Stadium is not. The old stadium burned down, but they actually play at PK Park for now, which is the Ducks baseball stadium.
Yeah.
But they're having a vote here this fall to for a tax levy or whatever they want to call it, to fund a stadium at the fairgrounds for the Emeralds. Because cool. Major League Baseball and the San Francisco Giants both said, number one, you need your own stadium. Yeah. And they needed, what honestly blows my mind was one of the things that other than sharing a stadium with the Ducks, that Major League Baseball said they needed was, number one, the visitors baseball teams don't have their own locker rooms. Mm-hmm. They bring in trailer, like those little trailers that you use to see at like schools.
Yep.
They use those for changing room, for locker room for the men or for the baseball teams. And they don't have changing rooms for female coaches or female umpires. And Major League Baseball is like, that's another thing you have to have. The women have to have their own locker rooms, and you need a locker room for visitors. So they're like, either you get this done by a certain time, or the Eugene Emeralds will be no more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Oof. Okay.
Are they working on site together so they can continue as a ball club?
Yeah, that's what they need. So hopefully the thing passes and they can get a stadium built at the fairgrounds, which would be a great thing for the fairgrounds as it is too.
So with bowling, you started your league bowling. Let's talk about bowling for a minute. With your leagues, what do you think? Are you currently bowling in a league now? I don't remember.
This summer I'm not. I'm just doing what they call their it's a drop, quote unquote, drop-in league. Basically every other week there's a house shot. It's like a mini tournament is really what it is. One week they do house shot, the next week they're doing a PBA shot. Like this past Wednesday, we just did the 2019 chameleon pattern, which that is a challenge. I tell you what. Um, but the way they do it, they do 4 qualifying games, and bowl, skip a pair, bowl, skip a pair, and then after that, the top 6 move on to an eliminator style. So all 6 bowlers bowl on the lane. After that game's done, top 4 move on, top 2 move on, and then you get your finals.
Nice. Michael, I'm guessing you're familiar with that pattern. Have you done that yet in one of your sweepers?
Chameleon? Yes, I have. I have bowled on, let's see, I have bowled on all the animal patterns: chameleon, shark, scorpion, cheetah, and viper. And chameleon was actually the pattern I lined up best with. The toughest pattern I lined up with was viper, and was kind of a shock to me because as long as shark usually is, you would think nobody like myself with hardly any hand is going to have trouble, but I struggled the most on viper. And I like to give you an idea on chameleon, I averaged like 192 the last time I bowled on viper. I averaged like 154.
Wow. Paul, do you notice a whole lot when you're I mean, obviously going from a house shot to pro shot, but how do you I guess adjust to the different lanes that you're on, the different patterns, different shots, or even just your game in general if you're struggling? How do you start to make adjustments?
That's one of the biggest things that I'm still learning. Because I don't have a coach. I've never had a coach. So I got back after living in California 10 years. Didn't really bowl much at all for about 15 to 20 years. So when we moved back here and realized, hey, there's a bowling alley basically across the street from my house, that's when I got back into bowling. And at the time, in fact, I looked at it this morning. The first year I got back in the league, I averaged a 135. And this was 3 years ago. So going from then to now, where I just finished our Sunday night league a couple weeks ago, averaging a 189. So going from 135 to 189, that was literally all me.
Yeah.
No coaching. I mean, I'd have people that I'd bowl with that would say, hey, move left, move right, try that and see what happens. But everything that I've learned, everything that I've done, I've watched a little bit on YouTube. It's just me picking out a ball and throwing it and seeing what finally works.
How Paul? Sorry, Dustin. I want to
No,
ask,
go ahead.
how long did you say you've been bowling for? Was it 4 years?
I've been back into bowling full time for 4 years.
4 years. Okay. All right. That's what I heard. All right. Go ahead, Dustin. I'm sorry.
No, you're good, man. Well, so what would we find in your arsenal? Do you just have one ball that you use? Do you have a couple? Do you have a spare ball? Tell us about how many balls do you got and what are they?
Right now I've got 5 balls. My primary ball lately has been my Storm Infinite Physics. My second primary ball is the Storm Absolute. And then also in my bag, I've got a Storm Phase 3. I've got a Urethane Pink Widow, and then I've got the new blue hammer.
Michael knows much.
Yeah, them last two sound pretty good. What do you think of those?
Haven't tried one yet. I'd be interested to try it.
So you said you had the Black Widow Pink Urethane and the new blue?
Yeah.
And have you rolled those at all, or did you just now recently get them?
I just recently got the new blue. I got the Pink Widow about a year and a half ago. I actually had used it for a while as my primary ball, because I hadn't figured out how to throw my Infinite Physics at that point. It wasn't until this year that I really got my Infinite Physics rolling.
Yep.
And that was after I got my absolute, because I got the absolute because I was like, I'd thrown it at a matchmaker event here, and I was just
Okay.
like, I love this ball, I gotta have it. So I
That's
got
hey,
it, and it was my primary ball for a while. And then it started falling off a bit, and so I was just messing around with my physics one day, and it just started hitting, and it's actually the ball that I'm currently most comfortable with. So it's the first ball I pull out on league. The house shot here, it works really good. So when I go to a tournament, it's the first ball I pull out. I pull out into my absolute because I'll throw my absolute at um, spares on the right side.
mm-hmm.
But for the most part, I try not to use an actual spare ball. I try to throw all my spares with whatever primary ball I'm throwing. That was one of the things that our PSO said, because he doesn't use one. He's like, I don't use a spare ball. He's like, if I'm throwing a ball, I'm throwing every shot with that ball. That way I'm just using the same ball all the time. And
Mm-hmm.
it's worked for me as well.
Okay.
So that's an interesting point. I'm glad you bring that up, Paul. Mike, what are your thoughts on that? Because I do this
Using one ball.
basically thing. Yeah, because you remember when I had just retired and I got here last summer, I got the Black Widow 2.0. You know, I'm throwing that, and that's my ball. I didn't get a spare ball. I would pick up my single pins and my spares. I just throw in that Black Widow, and that's typically what I do now. What are your thoughts on that, Mike, as a pro shop guy, of doing that as compared to getting that plus a white dot? You know what I mean? The primary ball, this is what I'm using, as Paul and I do, or the maybe pros and cons to that as opposed to primary ball, spare ball.
Well, if you're talking to me, I don't use a spare ball when I shoot my 10 pins either. I mean, it's really up to that bowler's preference of how they want to do things. I mean, what they're comfortable with. I believe in keeping the arsenal really simple. Well, like I took some notes here of all the bowling balls that Paul mentioned. One thing I do notice is the infinite physics and absolute. They're both pearls. They're both asymmetric. Paul, let me ask you this, buddy. Do you would you consider yourself a low rev player or a medium rev player or a high rev player?
Definitely not high. I'm probably medium to low.
Okay, all right. Well, that makes sense right here. Like I said, the infinite physics and the absolute, they're pretty strong pieces. They're both ASIMs. And then the phase three, that is, I would take a guess and say that would be your benchmark ball, Paul.
It's one of the it's actually the first um modern day ball that I bought.
Okay.
Because both the balls that I had previous were just um what they were late 90s, early 2000s when I got them. They were both just Brunswick zones.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the first balls that I've ever really purchased that were modern day balls, I guess, for
Okay.
lack of a better term.
No, no. So that's fun. Do you, what I mean by benchmark is usually we have it where a bowler has that one ball that they start with, and they're in practice, like you can ball up or you can ball down based on what that ball, your benchmark ball, is giving you look wise.
So my phase three, I actually don't pull it out of my bag very often unless my physics or my absolute just won't do anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only time I'll actually go to the phase three anymore. Um, Unless I'm in like a tournament situation where stuff's drying out really hard, really fast, then
Mm-hmm.
I might pull out my new just to deal with that. Or if I want to move around a little oil, then I'll pull out my pink hammer for a little while. But I primarily will stick with my physics or my absolute, and it's usually the physics because it's worked so well for me. I
Right.
don't do a whole lot of changing of balls.
Okay. Hey, you know what? And that simplifies the process when you're bowling.
Yeah.
A lot of bowlers get themselves into trouble, and I speak from experience from a couple of weeks ago. I was completely lost on the lanes, and the one I was really, I trusted a whole lot and giving me a look, and so then I would go up, in terms of overall stronger cover stock, and then that one would overhook, and then I'm in the in between zone, the over under zone as I like to call it, because if it fall down, it didn't hook enough, and then the one I was trusting wasn't giving me the usual look I'm used to, and then the one that was up above it, that would hook too much. So it was like a catch 22, and I couldn't win for losing. And definitely knowing your arsenal is always advantageous.
Yeah.
Yes.
But looking at your arsenal here, I mean, it looks pretty solid, Paul. You got you a pretty good set right here. I mean, again, like I said, the infinite physics being, I would say, then based on what we just talked about here, is your infinite physics is your benchmark ball, and that's what you use to kind of tell if you need to, you know, stay with it, or if you need to make a change, then you can do so.
Yeah.
Do you bowl in one house or do you bowl in multiple houses, Paul?
Um, for leagues, I've just been primarily at Furs. Obviously, we have in our local association, the Emerald Valley USBC, we've got 5 houses. The one just reopened. It's a little, what is it, like a 12 lane wood. Literally, they have to hand oil the lanes. They just reopened in Oak Ridge. And then we've got Strike City, which Dustin may remember as Fairfield Lanes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's in fact they actually didn't have any sanctioned leagues this winter because halfway through the winter they changed over to string pins.
Oh, okay.
So next year is going to be the first year that they'll actually have sanctioned leagues. They'll be back to having sanctioned leagues again. Then obviously Furs, Emerald, and then Cottage Bowl and Cottage Grove. I've done since I've been back to bowling. I've primarily bowled out of Furs. I bowled part of the men's league at Cottage Grove this year, and then I did a junior adult league last summer with my youngest at Cottage Grove last year.
So have you bowled on the string pins yet?
I have. I went in and bowled. I bowled 3 games there with my son one night. I didn't notice a huge difference in it.
I was about to ask.
I didn't see, like, you hear these people talk about, oh, you get these crazy carries and stuff, but I mean, I saw some carries that you probably wouldn't get without the string pins, but it wasn't anything like game breaking to me. I threw it a 710 and I didn't get that. Oh my gosh, that's so easy to pick up a 710 on a string pins, like I've heard too. So, I didn't personally notice that much about it, but I only bowled 3 games on it, so I wouldn't call myself an expert on them.
Okay.
Yeah, glad you mentioned the strings because I happen to bowl on them too in Missouri. I didn't know that they were string until we threw probably the second frame, and boom, I watched it hit, and I was like, "Wait, what was that?" And I that was the first time I kind of saw the strings. I would agree with Paul that, in my opinion, I thought that it was not Wazoo. In my mind, I expected, you know what I mean, like carnival looking stuff almost, not to be dramatic, but and I finally saw them, like, so I was like, oh snap, there's the strings. And then, but I agree, man. Some of them it was like, I bet it wouldn't have done that if there were no strings. But the same token, I felt like, I probably wouldn't have got that strike if the strings weren't there. But to me, there was not a huge difference. Even if you forget or you didn't know you're throwing at strings, like I didn't even know they were there till I happened to notice them.
Hey, Dustin, I'm
Yes.
going to bring this up on the screen here. Richard Harden is asking us, he's not familiar with string pins. What's that? I can give you the logist, but I want you guys to give him the answer since you guys have bowled on them before. But basically, Richard, to answer your question, there's a new way of setting up pins, and basically, the advantage to it that was like specified to everybody when they were coming up with this idea is that it would minimize lane malfunctions. The upside to that is obviously less lane malfunctions. The downside to it is people were concerned that one day it was going to eliminate the job of mechanics in the bowling center because of how technologically advanced this concept was. So that is my answer of everything that I know about string pins. How about Paul? Why don't you tell Richard, like I said, what you thought of it? You know, just kind of give us a, like I said, another summary of what you said a few minutes ago, just to reiterate the point, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I personally didn't notice a huge difference on them myself. I mean, like Dustin was saying, if you went into a center and they had them and you didn't know, they're pretty well hidden. You don't really see the strings until the pins start moving around. Then you can start seeing the pins. One of the technological advances with them is the pins. When the pins are falling over, if a string hits it and knocks the pin over, the pins know, or the lane knows if it was a string that hit the pin or if it was a pin that hit the pin. And if it's a string that'll hit the pin, it'll automatically stand that pin back up. That was
Oh,
one of the biggest advances. And the other thing, the other big advancement on them too is, and I know there's some centers that don't have string pins that they can do this, but you can just go up to the desk and say, "Hey, I need the 8 pin back up on lane such and such." They push a button and you got your 8 pin back again. So that's one of the big advantages, is especially if you're running a tournament there, you don't have to have that person in the back that's having to stand pins back up or knock pins back down.
right.
We were just talking about having somebody in the back earlier during league, high school meets, and other such things. I wonder, when you were just explaining that, Paul, I thought, I was like, oh, I wonder if they would be able to kind of do the opposite. And it's like, if I want to work on my corner pins or work on these, they'd be able to do it to where, boom, they just set up that for you instead of having to spot the certain spare or whatever. You know?
I know there are some lanes that you can actually do that. I want to say it's Super Play in Portland, where you can go in there and you can say, "Hey, can you just set me up with, you know, 3 10s or a 6 10 or just the 10 pin? I just want to throw 10 frames of a 10 pin," and they can actually set it up to where you can do that, to
That'd be
where
awesome.
when you knock it down, it'll stand just a 10 pin back up again instead of giving you a whole rack. So you can actually just sit there and get the lane set up to practice your spares.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
The first, just to kind of add on a little bit, the first time that I came around, really the only reason I know about string bowling was when I was a C mechanic there at AMF at the Palace. And I remember reading about it in one of the magazines, one of Bobby's magazines or something, with the parts and the this and that, and the USB-C one. And there's quite a, I don't know how big it is, but it seemed like quite the debate right now within the professional realm of whether string bowling will be legitimate or not. I don't know if you know any more on that, Michael, but that was kind of how I came across it, was in a USB-C magazine, I believe.
I can tell you exactly how I came across the whole concept from when it was being discussed as a possibility to where it is now.
Mm-hmm.
The internet has a lot of negativity, especially 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 in the bowling community. They do not see things from, and how can I word this? It's not much of an open perspective. So it's not my first rodeo with it. A lot of backlash, a lot of the, a lot of stuff that you guys discussed about your experience with it. Um, it's the same, wash, rinse, dry, repeat, that type of thing. That type of thing, because when the house shots were getting too easy, when we hit a boom in the late 90s, 2000s. I mean, even where we're at now, the amount of 300 honor scores, 800 series honor scores being shot exponentially increased over the years. So they brought in the challenge and the sport program as kind of a, hey, if you want to challenge yourself, let's do this. And it has its niche. And like you said, Paul, you bone on Chameleon. As a pro shop operator, I constantly tell people, hey, go try a challenge pattern, bowl on a pro pattern, bowl on a sport pattern, because at the end of the day, it's only going to make you better. And if nothing else, try it once or twice, because not only is it the most humbling experience you'll ever be a part of, it will actually, I try to tell people that it'll make you appreciate the league pattern that your house that you bowl at is put out.
Yeah. Which I think that's very cool that Paul was talking about. He gets to do those in almost like the tournament fashion things with other shot. And then, of course, everything that you do at the Palace with the different shot patterns, things like that, getting to see. It's very cool how much more these days you have access to doing that as a bowler.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because I'd never really heard of that until I started bowling again. It's like, oh, that's awesome. You know what I mean? And every weekend you're doing your sweepers. It sounds like Paul's got really good access to different shot. So that's cool to see, because you're absolutely correct. Is like, hey, man, diversify your oil pattern experience and see how it goes.
And I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, I'm sure, Paul, you being the big baseball fan, I mean, would you say the comparison is kind of like, knocking a bunch of home runs out of one stadium versus the next? Would that be a fair comparison?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So I mean, it's just whichever way you want to spin it. I mean, you go to a golf course. There's certain golf courses that are easier than others, and again, I'm sure. And you living in Denver for the amount of time, if you got to go to a Rockies game, I'm sure higher elevations, baseballs would travel farther. It's amazing how like some of these sports are intertwined, even like with bowling, which I know some people is like baseball, football, and you're like bowling. Well, it's kind of unique to me how they're all intertwined to an extent, as far as like skill level and such.
Yeah.
What skill level? Yeah, no, I agree across the board. And it's like skill level, and then also equipment, having the proper equipment. How often do we talk about that? Having the right stuff and knowing how to use it. That's the same in you may have the brand new bowling ball that just came out, the $300 ball, but if you don't know how to throw, there's no point in you having it. Just like a hitter, they got the greatest baseball bat that costs probably $1,000 these days, but you don't know how to hit, you don't know how to swing that bat.
Yeah.
People make this. Humans are humans. We're gonna make the same mistakes over and over in every sport. You know what I mean? And I think you're absolutely correct with, especially to be successful in those, it's going to take a lot of the same things, but a lot of the same traits and characteristics. You know what I mean? And perspectives, and just having that, like figuring out I don't know. I don't mean to get on a soapbox about that, but absolutely, I hope that made sense. But yeah, no, absolutely, very comparable.
Paul, let me ask this, buddy. Right now, what's your highest sanctioned game? You're in your highest sanctioned series.
Highest sanctioned game is a 267. And then I don't remember what my highest series is offhand now. I want to say it was in the high sixes.
High six. Okay. So you
Yeah,
haven't
something
shot
like that.
700 yet?
Have I? I don't honestly. Let's see. Okay, I have to look it up now. Now that you got me thinking about it. Let's see here.
That 267 game, which ball was you using? Was it that Infinite Physics?
Sorry, 266. No, that was an absolute down at Cottage Lane. That was my absolute at Cottage Bowl.
Okay.
And then my high series is 692.
Okay. All right. You're going to be at that 700 mark before you know it, Paul.
That is the hope. Let me ask you this one, Paul. When you're bowling, do you seem like a pretty even keeled guy? Do you stay pretty cool on the lanes, or if you shank, do you get upset? If you're off, do you get upset? And then, are you a talker? Do you talk to yourself while you're bowling at all?
Well, I I went through a period that I did struggle a lot, and there was a period of time where I had a propensity to get mad at myself, and that was a hard thing to just remember. You're just having fun. Just have fun. You're going to get there eventually. And the problem was I started out the year so well, and then I started having bad night after bad night after bad night. And then we get to the end of the first quarter in our trios league, and we'd been leading the first quarter the entire time. I mean, we started out hot, stayed hot, and we got to roll offs. And I absolutely tanked. I got 0 point because we do our trios league is a point league rather than just it's very much like basically a 3-person Swiss league is what it is. So I got 0 points that night. I cost us the quarter because all I needed was 2 points. Had I gotten 2 points, we would have won the quarter and we would have been in the grand finals roll offs. And even to the point that night that I was so frustrated that I kicked a chair right in front of the house owner. And what kind of frustrated me was he kind of got in my face about it. And I was just like, dude, not the right time. I am not. I mean, it's like, dude, you're bullying next to me. You've seen how frustrated I am. Don't get in my face about this right now. Pull me aside later and talk to me about it, but not right now. So yeah, that was a big struggle of trying to remember it's just fun. Just go have fun. And that's when things started turning around. And then towards the end of the season, just having fun with it again. I mean, I went through a few points where I was like, yeah, I'm ready to quit. I'm done. I'm done bowling. I'm quitting. But I didn't. I didn't give up, and it just got back to having fun again. And that's when my scores went back to where they should have been and started doing good again.
It can be very easy to forget the things that we're doing are supposed to be for fun.
Yeah.
And
supposed to be.
Do them, and we've spent money. You know what I mean? You got to remember this is supposed to be fun. I think that's a great point. And then especially to see that once you remembered that, realized that, got back to that mindset, your scores started going back up.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing when we were doing our pre-interview with Churchy the other day. Dustin, he kind of said the same thing. He kind of felt like he plateaued and he wasn't really having a whole lot of fun on the pro tour, and then he took some time off. And it's amazing what'll happen when you recharge your batteries. So very good points made there, Paul.
Yeah. Hey, I have a quick question for you. You mentioned your kids, 18 and 23. Do they bowl at all? Do you bowl? I know you said you did a generational league, which I'm looking forward to doing one against my kids. So how much do your kids bowl?
My oldest doesn't. He used to go with us every once in a while, but he didn't. It wasn't his thing. My younger son, he does from time to time now. He tried bowling a league this year, and I was like, and he turned 18 partway into the league, so he got into the league late. But I was like, this will be interesting to see how long he lasts, just because I had a sinking suspicion that he wasn't going to make it a 33-week season.
Yeah.
I was just like, that's too long. He's going to get tired of it. And lo and behold, about a month and a half before the end of the season, that's when he started getting tired of it. And then he got a job, and he was just like, yep, I'm not going bowling tonight. I'm not going bowling tonight. And everybody's like, well, why is he not showing up? And I'm just like, you ask him. He's 18 years old. Don't ask me. But
Yeah.
he does enjoy it, but he doesn't quite enjoy it the way I do. Whereas, if I could afford it, I would literally bowl 5 days a week at bare minimum.
Paul, what are you paying league fees right now? How much are y'all paying per week, or how much did y'all pay in the fall?
Well, depending on the league, our Sunday night league was $14 a week, and then our Monday night league was $20. But our Monday night trios is also 4 games. originally it was going to be $19 a week, but when we were discussing before the season, we had a prize committee that we sat down and was like, so with obviously with the lineage going up, they're like, to go with what we did last year, it would have to be $19 a week.
Right.
But $20 just made more sense because then you just got to bring a $20 bill each week.
Right.
And then we thought we were like, okay, that works great. And then plus, that's an extra dollar per person per week that goes straight into the prize fund. It's like, yeah, let's do that. So yeah, it was 14 and 20 is what we paid on those. Wasn't too bad.
Okay. I I know you probably saw me going, wow, like, I was in amazement because both of the leagues I bowl in, we're at $30 a week.
Wow.
There it is. Wow. Dustin,
one
I got another question for him after you get done asking what you're about to ask.
I don't know much of a question. We haven't talked about this yet since the pre-show deal with Eugene and both of us being from Oregon. It's crazy, man, kind of talking about your son. That reminded me again during the time I break in service. So I don't know, 2004, 5, and 6, something like that. It was the poker boom when Texas Hold'em had taken over the world. Chris Moneymaker just won, so it just blew up. Man, life at that time for me and my buddies was poker. The only time I'd ever looked forward to a Monday night was bowling league, right there, Emerald Lanes. So we'd play poker all weekend and talking about bowling come Monday. And those are the longer ones, the 33, 36 week, whatever leagues like you were talking about, Paul. And that's all I knew when I was talking to Mike last summer. Like, hey, man, I want to do league. I haven't done one since Eugene, but man, those were great. And then I'd asked you before the show again, I cannot believe my homeboy Forrest is still there at Emerald Lanes.
He absolutely is.
Now I love the man to death. What would I don't worry, we're not friends, so I won't tell him. You can badmouth him behind his back if you want to. What's your take of Mr. Forrest?
I haven't really interacted with him that much because I don't bowl there very much on a regular basis. It's just when I go in there, it's strictly for practice. Most of what I know of him is just word of mouth.
Yeah.
So I haven't really had any interaction with him myself.
So we got to kind of know him pretty well. This was in high school. So before I left for the Marines, my buddy Jeff and I, he would buy, back in the day, you could get 100 games for $100 on like a punch card that he would do. So we would skip class and then we would go bowl and talk. And so it's dead in the alley and we're bowling and that's how we kind of got to know Forrest. And he's one of those guys, man, that if you just look at him, so probably from what you know him, if you look at him, he seems like he's always just very even keel. He's never in a hurry to get anywhere or do anything. Is that fairly accurate for Forrest?
From what I've heard, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But even back then was just a depth of knowledge I can't even imagine now because he was the man around there back then even,
Yeah.
We bowled against him on those Monday nights, and of course he's a great bowler. And I always have had a sense of humor and have been pretty quick-witted and like to talk smack. And he's pretty good at it too, but his stuff is like kind of very blunt. And you almost, if you're not paying attention, you may be like, wait, what did he just roast me? He's kind of got that type. And he got under my skin one time in bowling league. And I popped off back to him, like replying, blah, 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 Forrest. And as soon as I did, I was like, damn it, he got me. He got under my skin. But great guy, man. I'm really glad to hear that he's still there. That's really cool. That was just kind of my commenting there because Emerald, that was our home lanes pretty much. Other than Timber, you remember Timber? Is Timber Bowl still there on Main Street?
Sadly, Timber is not, and I bowled there in the late '90s, early 2000s, and the one, and my dad bowled there when he bowled leagues when we lived when I was a kid living in Springfield. The one thing that I will always remember about that place is you didn't have the seating areas like you see in the huge places nowadays where you've got the tables and the chairs and even sometimes you have the high top tables. There it was 2 layers of stadium seating. So you would you'd walk up a couple steps and walk down and pick your place to sit, just like you were going to a football game or a baseball game, or you go up to the second level and the same thing. That was the one thing that I always remembered about that place. And it had the above ground ball returns. So you throw your ball and you'd watch your ball come back above ground.
Yeah, it was pretty old and run down from what I remember.
It was, but it
Yeah.
was always fun. And you walk in, it smelled like a freaking diner because the food was the kitchen was right there. There was nothing hiding the kitchen or anything. That had their all that good stuff.
Right on. All right, Michael, what you got, brother?
So, Paul, what type of bowling goals do you have, short term and long term?
Well, my short term goals are the same every year, is to improve on the previous season. So like I was looking at my score, my composites earlier today on bull.com, which haven't quite got all of them updated yet for this year, but uh, come back up here again. So when I first came back, the first league I bowled in back in 21, 22 was a 141. So my goal from there was just to improve, and I did. I went up from that winter league to the summer league. I improved 11 pins. I was up to 152. And so that's just really always been my goal, is to keep that progression going. So I finished my highest league this year was a 189. So my goal next year is to go plus 10 pins. My goal is to get right there on the cusp of hitting a 600 series every week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Long-term
Very,
goals
very
is
realistic, grounded goal. I like it.
yeah, my long-term goal is to get to the point where like there's two different organizations here that run scratch tournament series. There's the OBA, the Oregon. I imagine they're the Oregon Bowling Association. Then there's SOBA, which is Southern Oregon Bowling. Two different. They both run on sport patterns. So my goal is to get to the point where I can get into those and at least compete. I don't see myself winning because there are a lot of scratch bowlers that bowl those, but my goal is to be able to at least get in and bowl at least a couple of them a year, and if I don't make the money.
Like I said, very realistic with what you got, man. I like your plan, Paul.
I actually really like that one about scratch too, because we have had many discussions about handicaps and scratch and things like that. And the way that you put that was great. Being able to just kind of hang at scratch tournaments. I think that's a great goal that won't be close to anytime soon, but I think that's a goal that I could set kind of for myself, is like being able to go do a scratch tournament and not expect to win. It's not that I'm down on myself, but I think that you're very right, that it's like, hey, I can at least hang at scratch tournaments.
Yeah.
So, Paul, let me ask you. Let me ask you this: when you're bowling your leagues, from your experience, and I know you said that you did you. I feel like you posted some scores on TikTok from. Was that from the Chameleon Challenge or?
This past week, yeah, that was the chameleon pattern.
Okay. Did you also? And you can tell me if I'm wrong here. Did you not post a video about you? I think you were bowling like state tournament. Was that what that was?
Yeah, I posted lately. I've been posting some shots from the state tournament.
Okay, that leads me into this. Tell everybody out there, but with your experience, what do you think is the difference between bowling in a league for the first time versus bowling in a tournament for the first time?
Well, tournaments, well, league, it's the community coming together to have fun together. They're like here, they're very social. There's not a whole lot of hugely competitive aspect to it. Um, and then when with a tournament, I mean, it depends on the tournament organization you go through. Like here for handicap tournaments, we have Revolutionary Tournament Bowling. which is it's a handicap tournament.
Right.
They're handicap tournaments that the guy that runs it is very much about just bringing bowlers together and having a good time and making some money doing it. So one of the things that I got out of doing that is, I mean, I was the first time I did one that I was really serious about, I was fairly intimidated because I was, bowling up against some seriously really good scratch bowlers. So I was like, I got intimidated at first, but then when I started talking to these guys, it's like, oh, these guys are really cool. They're down to earth guys. You have your few in there that think that they're, for lack of a better term, the shit don't stink. But I mean, the general consensus that I'd gotten from it was, again, just it was almost like a monthly or a bi-monthly league. It was because it was a lot of times it was the same people bowling it, just different setups, whether it be a singles, a doubles, a trios, a 5-person Swiss, a 4-person Swiss, just depending on the type of tournament it was. But that's a lot of what it is RTV has that feeling of just a year-long league that's just all tournaments.
No. Okay. So, what is your personal preference? Do you prefer double, trios, 4-person, 5-person?
My personal preference are what he calls the mega buck singles.
Okay.
Number one, I only have to rely on myself, and I don't. And if I have a bad day, I don't have anybody else that I'm bringing down on it. The really fun thing about that is they do it's a 2 squadded tournament. So you have a morning squad that's usually the smaller of the two. A lot of times it's between 36 and 40 bowlers. And then the afternoon, or the burn squad, as everybody likes to call it, is usually around 48. Um, and then so you bowl your squad, and then so many people come out of your squad, and then the second squad goes, and then so many people come out of that. And then usually does from there, you do a 3-game semifinal, and then the step ladder after that. The one downfall to that one is a lot of times, depending on how many people are in it, it can go really late. And a lot of times he ends up doing them depending on the bowling alley, they happen a lot of times on Sundays.
Mhm.
So there was one that I actually got home from league bowling on a Sunday night in time to watch the final matchup of it. And this was like 9:30 at night. So I got home from bowling and watched the finals from the tournament. It was like, that's crazy, guys. That's just too long. But I mean, I don't mind regardless of which one it is. I have fun with it. So um, I like Swiss because it's a lot of that head to head bowling. I do like the head to head bowling. Um, I just like to bowl, so I guess it really doesn't matter to me personally.
No, I like the ending of your answer there. I just like the bowl, and I feel like if we had more people that thought the way that you do, we'd have a hell of a lot more bowlers in the entire country, and participation would be up. And so just I appreciate your mindset, sir, and I hope more people take after that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Dustin, you got anything to add here?
Yeah, I think my last question for you, Paul, would be if you could share something. It can be a piece of advice that pertains to bowling, it can be advice that pertains to life, or it can be a piece of advice that you could use for both. What would you share with younger people?
Have fun with life and don't stress. Or as the old saying goes, don't sweat the petty stuff and don't pet the sweaty stuff.
I like it. And
I
it's
tell you what, guys, I think we're reaching our apex here. Paul, once again, my friend, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for
Uh,
having me. I appreciate it.
Oh man, hey, like I said, you're killing it on TikTok, man. You keep doing what you're doing, and again, like I said, Paul right here, he was one of the first couple of people that really started taking a liking to the brand. And when I was doing my promotion for hats, Paul's had every time he's bowling, most of the pictures I see, you've got the hat on, you're sporting the brand, and hopefully everybody out here sees the face to the brand, and you can build it up and tell them I got hats. I'm ready to send to them, and being able to reach out there all the way in Oregon, man. Like I was telling Dustin, it's an awesome thing that that's going on here, and like I said, we're talking to everyday people, and it's just a phenomenal thing that's going. So, Paul, like I said, man, thank you, sir, and keep doing what you're doing, my friend.
No problem. And one quick story about that hat, which makes me wear that hat all the time.
Yeah.
The day I bought that hat, I had my single best solo bowling day ever. Because I had seen it that morning, and you had messaged me back, just send me the money this way, and then we'll get it done. And that day, it was our tournament of champions for RTB for last year.
Mm-hmm.
The 6 qualifying games, all but one of them was a 200 game.
Nice.
My low game was like a 195. And then it was a 16-person tournament bracket to get to the final, to get to the championship and be the tournament of champions winner. And I ended up second place. So
Nice.
that hat is good luck to me, because the day I bought it was the day I had my second place in the tournament of champions.
Yeah.
Oh man, dude, I tell you, man, that makes me feel good, and it's like I was telling Dustin, and what we were talking about earlier before we got on here live. The idea was it really came from a stupid concept, and if anybody wants to know how it became about, go watch our Calling All Bowlers episode last week with Jackson, and you'll get the 411 there. But that's my thing. I'm trying to do with this. Just bring a presence to bowling, bring people together, like you spoke about with everybody out there in Oregon, and again, like what it's doing in Utah. It's a really really awesome thing just to see. And I think another thing that's really unique about it is a lot of people as bowlers, may not see the picture right now, but we are closely knitted together than we may think, as far as bowlers in the bowling community from a city level, state level, and even in this case, talking to you right now on a national level. Just that's the most wonderful thing in the world.
Agreed.
Well, everybody, this is going to conclude episode 4. Paul, once again, thank you so much for your time, my friend. I really do appreciate it. Dustin, you are the whiz at keeping us from going down the rabbit hole. And Paul, if you got some time tomorrow, if you really want to see one of my mentors as far as bowling goes, we're going to have what is this, episode 7, Dustin?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure 7.
We're going to have episode 7 of the Damn Good Average Bowler podcast with the timeless wonder Tony Churchy. And needless to say, just to give you a 411, it took me 20 years to out average him. So I hope you'll join us for that, Paul. And like I said, man, keep doing what you're doing on TikTok. And everybody out there, subscribe to my YouTube channel, follow me on TikTok, follow me on Instagram, and like us and follow us on Facebook. And once again, guys, thank you for being with us. And like I said, this was a great episode, and I appreciate you both. And Paul, thank you so much, sir.
Thanks again for having me.
Thank
All
you.
right. All right. You guys have a wonderful evening. Everybody out there, thanks for watching us. And we'll be with another one of these real soon with another guest. And y'all have a wonderful evening.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Take care.